I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Bowling Green, and good afternoon, Columbus. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes. Oh, and also hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. Rebecca and I are about to create an amazing program called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families, and the people who are living in the south there getting pummeled with rain and water and dam failures, and you know, the people that are watching them, and basically everyone and everything, every living thing everywhere on the planet, because like it or not, all of us are on the same wonderful planet called Earth. And we have a wonderful show for you today. Kind of interesting show. First, we're going to just chat about a few things for the next 10 minutes or so. Then we have an interview with the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States, Chase Oliver. And so what I've done in terms of giving, equal access, I sent exactly the same email to all the presidential candidates, the Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, and Green. And the Libertarians got right back to me. And so we have an interview with Chase Oliver. And hopefully we'll have an interview with all the others. Hopefully, Trump and Harris will get back to me and say, oh, we're sorry it took so long to respond, but now we'll get on your show. So I tend to pressure them now, now that one presidential candidate has agreed, we'll try to get the rest of them on the air for you. So then after we hear from Chase Oliver, we're going to be hearing from our wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then Rebecca, it will be your turn. And what will we be talking about this week?
We will be talking about hydrogen.
Hydrogen. Ah, yes. An underappreciated element. Okay, cool. And then it's ecological news. And we've got some very interesting ecological news from around the world. And at some point, of course, hopefully we'll hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007, because this is a call-in show. This is why we make the effort to do it live every week, because we love hearing from you folks. All right, and something else I love just is our puffballs. Have you ever heard of puffballs?
Yippers.
Yes.
I may have even stomped on one or two.
Well, you shouldn't stomp on them because they're delicious. They're one of the few edible fungi that I'm confident enough to actually harvest because they're very unique. It's hard to mistake them for the non-puffballs, because real puffballs have no stem at all.
Right.
Yeah, so they could be round, or the one I went out and I harvested one yesterday, and it was about the size of a really big cauliflower head. It was,
wow,
about 10 by 5 inches or so. And it was delicious. We fried it up and we had it with some other stuff like beet soup and things, and it was really a great dinner. But it's just a reminder, and another thing I foraged this past week was staghorn sumac berries, because what I do with those is you take them and you put them in a clean cloth, like from an old T-shirt or something, and you pour boiling water through them, and they make pink lemonade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it tastes like lemonade. It's delicious. It's got more vitamin C than actual lemonade.
Excellent.
And, when I forage little things like this, it's just a reminder that nature really is bountiful. As Europeans, we're trained to think that nature is this horrible, harsh thing we've got to fight and dominate. And, but really, if we don't mess with it, the natural world actually will provide us with everything we want and everything we need, as long as we don't exceed the boundaries of that bounty, which, that bounty is really immense. So we have to work hard to reduce the natural bounty enough that it won't support us. But things like foraging puffballs and getting some staghorn sumac,
Also,
lemonade.
the thing that I thought was a giant puffball in our front yard may have actually been a hornet's nest.
Oh,
So I'm glad I didn't stomp on
yeah,
it.
that's right. Another good reason
Yeah.
not to go around stomping things. Yeah. So,
Unless you're really sure it's not a hornet's nest.
yeah. So, but again, just a reminder that if we don't mess with things, they'll take care of us. But of course, we are messing with things. We're messing with things in a huge, monumental way. And one of the results of that, one of the things that we see that were caused by that, was this tremendous Hurricane Helene that we had this past week. Just an incredible storm. Only about 64 people dead so far, but that number's sure to increase as
And nobody in Kentucky, apparently. I looked, and so far they're not among. I was worried about poor little Murray and Mayfield, that as what got hit by the giant tornado a few years ago.
right. And so remarkably few deaths, but lots of property damage. I mean, the estimates are over $100 billion right now, and we're still, digging out and getting to communities that have been cut off. So we're going to see what
We shall
happens.
see. Yep.
But and about at least a dozen of those 64 official fatalities were from people who lived on the Florida coast and refused to evacuate from the storm surge, and so were drowned in their houses. So really sad, but you can only take global warming denial so far before you really start to get,
Well, I mean,
suffer
the problem
consequences.
is some people literally do not have the money to evacuate, too.
Well, that's true. That's true. But most of the time, if you want to evacuate, you can contact
Right.
the local police and say, please evacuate me. Last minute, they'll come and take you at least to the nearest shelter. So yeah, I mean,
I worry about that, because if Toledo ever gets evacuated, we're down to sort of hoping somebody remembers to take us with them.
yeah, it would not be pretty if we had to, like, if Davis Bessie was going to blow and we had to evacuate, it would not be pretty around here. But so at the peak, 4 million people were without power. As of this morning, Sunday morning, the 29th, there's still 2.6 million people without power. A lot of them are going to not have power for a whole week. And interestingly, I looked at the reports, and we actually have about 20 households here in Northwest Ohio, in Lucas and Williams County, that are without power because the winds of the past couple of weeks took down local power lines. So that gives you an idea of just the scale of the storm. This storm was, I believe, is going to turn out to be one of the largest storms in history. It only took 2 days to form, which is amazingly fast. It had sustained winds of 140 miles per hour, Category 4. And the thing about the amount of energy in the wind is it's the cube of the wind speed, right? So if you have winds that are twice as fast, it's not twice as powerful. It's 2 times 2 times 2. It's 8 times as powerful. So twice the wind speed equals 8 times the energy in the wind. And it's also the square of the area. So again, if you have double the area, it's not twice as much energy. It's 2 to the second power. It's 2 times 2. It's 4 times as much energy. So the bigger it is, it goes the square of the area and the cube of the speed. And so this monster of a storm was officially 430 miles wide, which is actually smaller than it became, because at the peak, this storm stretched all the way from the tip of Florida all the way up here to Ohio. It was over 1,000 miles wide. And so just the amount of energy in this storm was incredible. But it's just a taste. It's just the shape of things to come. This is not, they're just going to get bigger and they're going to go faster. One thing that I thought was interesting was that they didn't talk about how rapidly this thing intensified. Just last year, they were still saying it's incredible how quickly these storms are forming. But NASA actually described, when they were doing their little history of this storm, they actually used the word slow. They said it slowly developed as it crossed the Gulf. No, if you go from nothing, like a tropical depression, to a Category 4 hurricane in 2 days, that's fast, okay? And yeah, in the old days, the pre-global warming enhanced storms, it would take at least a week or up to a month. You'd have the storms taking a whole month to get to hurricane strength. And now it's happening in 2 days. So it's also interesting that, even according to official numbers, it was 420 miles wide, third biggest storm in 35 years. But it hit Florida, which is the state that has made discussion of global warming illegal.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't talk about global warming in Florida. They've removed it from all their websites. You can't teach about it in schools. So Governor Ron DeSantis, right now, who's begging for federal dollars to get disaster relief for the Florida citizens, still doesn't admit to the cause of these monster, super destructive, $100 billion damage storms. And they're going to keep coming, folks. We're just a little bit halfway past the hurricane season. That goes all the way till November. And the Gulf waters did not cool down very much after this huge storm. So there's still enough energy to generate another one. And so most of us, almost all of us, agree that global warming's happening. It's a problem. We've got to do something about it. But
That's big, not cold, Joe. We have to not use the words warming or global.
oh yeah, global not cold enough.
Big, not cold.
Big not cold.
Yes.
Ing? Yes.
Yes.
All right. So, but
Like using Newspeak in 1984, double plus on good.
yeah. So, one interesting thing is that even the libertarians, for the most part, a lot of libertarians, I should say, since it's hard to say, hard to generalize anything libertarians believe, because you talk to any of them and they have it's completely different across opinions. But even most libertarians agree global warming is a problem and want to deal with it. But they don't believe in government regulation. So they don't believe in, government policies to encourage people to buy electric cars, or, they want the market to drive literally everything. And so it was very interesting for me to be able to interview Chase Oliver, because I got to kind of pin him down on this idea of, how are you going to fix problems like global warming if you can't do it through government regulation? And so it was, I enjoyed doing the interview, and I'll let him speak for himself now. So this is our interview with Chase Oliver, Libertarian candidate for president. Great. Well, hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please introduce yourself and just give us a brief understanding or a description of libertarian philosophy?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chase Oliver, the 2024 Libertarian candidate for President of the United States, on the campaign trail here in a hotel room. And libertarianism, broadly speaking, is about empowering the maximum individual liberty, basically saying that if you are not harming another person through force, fraud, coercion, theft, or violence, you should be left to your own devices because you're exercising proper self-governance. There's no need for the monopoly of force of government to invade what you're doing. And so generally speaking, we're about maximum liberty for each and every person, holding government accountable, keeping them transparent, and limiting the power that government has to change our lives, if we're not doing anything wrong.
All right, great, thanks. So our program focuses on environmental issues, for a green future. So first of all, I assume libertarians and you agree that the environment should be kept clean and protected, and that global warming is a real problem that we all need to deal with.
Yeah, well, I absolutely support the idea that we need to have clean air, clean water, a clean environment for ourselves, our communities, our families to grow up in. And I'm certainly one who sees the impact of carbon in our atmosphere and what that's doing, and that there's a need to address those issues. I don't know if that's a 100%, everybody across the board believes that. But I certainly do. And as the standard bearer of the Libertarian Party, I want to talk about what solutions we can find to those issues that might be a little bit different than maybe what you've heard from the Democrats or Republicans.
Okay, well, that segues nicely into my next question, which is, you know, libertarians are famously opposed to environmental regulations. In the first part of the 20th century, we really sort of had a libertarian environment in that there were very few environmental regulations. And during that time, Lake Erie caught fire, or Lake Erie died, the Cuyahoga River caught fire. Um, how would libertarians prevent that from happening again without government regulations?
So I think one of the best areas of government to really address when air or water or other environmental factors are being polluted is actually our court system through the judicial system. I advocate for a full removal of court caps, which are basically artificial ceilings that have been created to pay out damages for pollution, for instance. So a chemical company, they are fine polluting because they say, hey, we can build in that tort, into our yearly budget. We might anticipate getting sued, but because of this tort cap, it's not going to take too much out of our pocket. If we remove tort caps, you allow citizen juries to say, hey, you're poisoning our community. We're going to bankrupt you, or we're going to fine you so much that you're going to pay for the full cleanup of this effort. And it's not going to be put on the back of the taxpayers. It's going to be put on your back. And that creates a real world incentive for those who may pollute to not pollute, to be more transparent about the actions they're taking to keep the environment clean, doing what they're doing. And it also creates a market incentive for people to want to say, hey, I'm going to go purchase from the cleanest producer of this product. I'm going to go find somebody who actually cares about the environment and who isn't just saying, hey, if we get sued, it's just built into the cost of doing business. And when we remove those tort caps, you empower citizen juries to punish the polluters directly through civil litigation. And I think if we had that environment, you would have seen a lot less intentional polluting from a lot of these chemical companies and others that have been just dumping all sorts of crap into our water, putting it up into our air. Make it hurt for them. And if you do, they have an incentive to not do it.
Mhm.
That's how you change their behavior.
I see. What do you think about the idea of revoking corporate charters for companies that
Well, I think certainly that could be something that if you are damaging and there's a proof of damage enough to individuals, that's something that you can look at. Like, why are you incorporated if you're providing a real harm to people? I'd have to see exactly what legislation would lead to that or exactly what the statutes are, but it doesn't sound something terrible off of its back. If you're violating the basic rules of the road, there should be some sort of punishment for that.
Okay. So you're from Georgia, and we reported last year on the whole controversy over the cutting down forests to create that cop city. And I know you've spoken in support of those protesters and in opposition to that project. Can you give us an update on what's happened with that and maybe what's happened to the protesters and how this fits into your vision of government?
Yeah, so for those not familiar with Cop City, basically the Atlanta Police Foundation, the city of Atlanta wanted to tear down one of our four great forests in Atlanta, the four lungs of Atlanta, to build this giant police training facility that we didn't really need. They already had facilities they could have retrofitted and improved upon, but they decided it was basically, not to get too deep in the weeds, it was the Atlanta city government as I'm sorry to the Atlanta City Police for not supporting them hard enough during the George Floyd moment and when there were people out protesting. It's kind of a giveaway to them. Right now, we're in the process of, we had collected well over 100,000 signatures. I think it was over 110,000 signatures in order to put a referendum on the ballot to cancel this facility. Now, what has happened is the city of Atlanta has been dragging their feet ever since then. That was a year ago that we turned in those signatures, and we still have not gotten our day on the ballot. And so at this point, it's looking like, unfortunately, the facility is going to likely be mostly built by the time citizens have a say-so. And the next step of action is actually organizing ourselves to oust those who voted for the facility, who dragged the feet of the city. And so that means the mayor and the city council. We need to organize at over 100,000 people to get ready to vote in 2025, which is when we have our city council mayoral elections. And I can tell you right now, whether I'm the president-elect or just a citizen in 2025, 2025, whether I'm president or not, I'm certainly going to be active and organizing to help oust those members of city council, because they have not listened to us. They have torn down so much green space in Atlanta, which is the greenest city in the country, by the way. We have the most tree coverage of any major metro area, and this has really affected that. And we've even seen the death of protesters at the hands of police. Person name, their nickname was Tortuga, which means little turtle. They were killed by police protesting this, and they were an environmental protester. They were somebody who was standing for the forest and standing for the right of green space, particularly after, by the way, this is all to say that in 2017, the Atlanta city government said that this land will be green space in perpetuity. I guess in perpetuity meant until it was politically convenient to no longer do that.
Yeah,
so I
roughly.
happily stand with Stop Cop City.
So perpetuity is roughly 5 years, I guess, in Atlanta. So,
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So like the Greens, the Libertarians, and you in particular, have been accused of being a spoiler in elections. Do you agree with those saying that we need fewer choices, as in only two, or do you think we need more?
Well, I certainly think we need more. First off, you can't spoil something that's already rotted to the core, and that's the two-party system in this country. That's the polarization that the Democrats and Republicans have presented to us. So there's nothing that the Greens or I could do to spoil it any more than it already is. Just look at congressional approval ratings at under 20% and the reelection rate of over 90%, and there's something wrong with the system. And we need more choices. We need more voices in the process. We need to add we need to make it easier for more candidates to get on the ballot. 60% of the legislature races in my home state of Georgia run unopposed because the Reds and the Blues have gerrymandered the districts into safe red and safe blue, where they don't even run an opposing candidate in the fall. And there's only one choice on the ballot. Is that democracy? I don't think so. And so we need to reform ballot access. We need to have more proportional representation as opposed to statewide winner-take-all electoral college wins. And we need to expand the way we vote, namely ranked choice voting or approval voting, so that way we don't have the so-called spoiler effect. Those are the things we can do to expand our democratic choices, to expand the spectrum of what voters can find on their ballot that represents them, and we can have a truly more representative republic. But until we change those things, we're going to be stuck with the same two-party system over and over again. It's why I advocate for the thing called the Voters' Bill of Rights. It was written by a fellow libertarian named Lars Mapstead, and it's fully part of my platform. And it talks about what we need to do to change the system to make it more viable for Greens, Libertarians, Constitution Party, and basically anybody else across the left-right spectrum to really be represented in our government, as opposed to what we have today, which is two corporately owned, one left, one right party. They're two wings of the same bird. They're both absolutely corrupted. And the only way to end that corruption is to expand the choice. So I'll join with anybody in that effort, certainly.
Okay. So if you're a great supporter of democracy, so hypothetically, what if people in a community directly voted for environmental laws, like a plastic bag ban or limits on pollutants in their community? Would you support regulation then if it was like put in place directly by democratic vote?
Well, I think to me, those kinds of regulations or things like that are best done at the most local level. But ideally, as a libertarian, we want to be able to educate the public about, say, the dangers of plastic bags and what the true cost of that, not just the dollar cost, but the cost of the environment, and encourage people to shop elsewhere, to change their behaviors. And you've already seen this in the last 20 years. I've seen more and more people bringing their own bags into the grocery store and exercising the please don't bag my groceries, I have my own. Like, just that kind of behavior alone has taken unknown numbers of just plastic bags out of the environment. If we can educate consumers more about who is providing the best practices, the market can actually respond just as well as a government regulation can, so long as everything is transparent and we're being, and we're providing as much information as possible. I truly believe we don't necessarily need government regulation to change human behavior, but if there's going to be a government regulation like that, it needs to be done at the most local level, decentralized as much as possible.
Okay. Well, and we're just about at the end of the interview here, but I always like to give my guests the last word. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered yet? And, with the focus on environmental stuff, if you could.
Yeah, I think the best way we can focus on global warming and actually addressing the climate change crisis is to fully create a free market race for energy, to fully remove all subsidies and all deductions and all giveaways for any kind of energy, because the one we most subsidize is oil, natural gas, and coal, carbon-based fuels. If we fully removed all subsidies and, of course, untied the hands of what I believe is the most viable power source to get us beyond carbon-based power, nuclear energy, we could see a real change in the way we power this country, one that does not burn carbon, one where the waste can actually be stored and addressed and moved if it needs to be. In fact, many of the newer plants can actually use old waste to keep creating power. This is what I really want to see, is a free market energy future that can address climate change. And I want to leave your listeners with this. It may seem dire sometimes. We may seem like, oh my God, how are we ever going to pull ourselves out of this environmental hole we're in? But the truth is each and every day there are new people being born who have the chance to create the innovative technology, to create the way we're going to power ourselves or produce things in the future that have less of an impact on the environment. And I am confident, and maybe it's just I'm an optimist, but I know that human power, human innovation will create the solutions that we need. And so as dire as it may seem sometimes, never, never, ever lose hope for a brighter and better future for ourselves and for our environment.
Okay, well, I know I said I'd give you the last word, but I got to come in on that nuclear question, though. I mean, this show, and a lot of people look at nuclear as essentially a tremendous environmental problem, not an environmental solution, because of the wastes, but also because of the tremendous expense and the slowness of nuclear power. I mean, you're living in Georgia, which has the two Vogtle plants, which are the most expensive power plants ever built in human history. And they're going to be increasing electricity rates for Georgians for the next 60 years, bankrupting a lot of poor Georgians to support a power which, as you said, if you remove all subsidies, for example, the price water insurance support for nuclear, if you remove all subsidies, nuclear comes out the most expensive, and wind and solar come out the least expensive. So it seems to be, if you removed all subsidies, nukes would be the first to go.
Well, we'll have to see. In a true free market of energy, that's the thing. Like, maybe I'm correct, maybe you're correct, maybe it's a combination of both. I suspect that across the spectrum, there's gonna be a lot of different power sources. What I would say is a lot of nuclear technology that we're not really looking at today is like salt thorium reactors and smaller impact reactors that have a much smaller footprint or much quicker to build and can power small cities. Without maybe the same land use footprint that solar or wind might provide. But ultimately, I want to see a free market of energy. So let's just fully remove the subsidies. And again, the highest subsidy we give is to carbon-based fuels. And let's see really what the fuel of the future is, what the energy sources of the future are, but let consumers decide that thing and not centrally planning it through government. Because I think people have a vested interest in cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner energy sources. And so if we can provide that, without overburdening or subsidizing carbon-based fuel, I think they will win in the long run. Whichever one wins, we do better when we have that free market of energy.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chase.
Thank you.
And thank you, folks, for listening to our interview with the Libertarian presidential candidate. And as regular listeners to the show probably guessed, I couldn't let him just get away with a plug for nuclear power. And it is a point that if you just let all the different energy sources compete on their merits and not based on subsidies, wind and solar will win. Nuclear would lose. Even fossil fuels would lose now. But an interesting interview. And if you have any comments on it, if this wants to spark some sort of conversation today, we'd be happy to get you on the air. 877-909-1007. 877-909-1007. Okay, so now it's time to hear from our wonderful, wonderful advertisers and patrons. So let's hear from them now.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
Okay, and we are also very grateful for the support of our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon, searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They looked through the different membership levels, looked at some cute pictures of dogs and cats, because we do have a dog level and a cat level, chose a level that matched their monthly budget. And so now every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us. And that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you so much to our patrons. Okay, Rebecca, and now thank you to you for giving us a little something every week, interesting little vignette. What have we got this week?
Well, this week, this Wednesday, I learned that some hydrogen tanks near a grocery store that I go to pretty regularly were on fire.
Aha.
So I kind of looked at the map and discovered that we were too far away to be subject to the evacuation so far anyway. And then I made a couple calls because I know people in Point Place and out Alexis who aren't that far from there. And yeah, certainly my Point Place friends did not know. And they're probably the closest, so I got them to keep an eye on it. But yeah, okay, so more or less what happened, I've been going through the news articles. According to WTVG, on the first reference I could find was on the 25th, Wednesday? I think that's Wednesday.
I think so.
Yeah, last Wednesday according to at 5 o'clock, but according to the 11 o'clock news is when it finally got reported it on. TPD and TFD crews evacuated a 1 mile radius around Enterprise. The Enterprise is like sort of a big industrial area that's up there that you go through on the way to Myers mostly. And it's like an industrial area behind a popular shopping plaza, basically. So yeah, I've heard various things, that it was a 1 mile radius or that it was a half a mile radius. I know that initially they did not know what was in the tanks, which was a little scary. So, they say, we evacuated with either a mile or a half mile radius because we didn't know what was in the tanks. But it's been 4 days and it's still evacuated partially.
Wow.
So that's a little scary. Yeah, I heard on I first ran across this on the Toledo police scanner website, and they were saying that a bunch of businesses just kind of like walked out, left their lunch boxes, left the door open in some cases. It was pretty intense, I gather. On the next day, the 26th at 6:53, WTVG stated that it was a half mile radius because the couple of tanks, several tanks had in fact caught fire. So 1 day later, the businesses were still evacuated. Fire was still burning. Fire and rescue apparently fought all night to try and take care of this. Apparently the business that owns these tanks is called IH2. It's a hydrogen supplier and producer. And semi-drivers, a lot in the area, couldn't make deliveries, a bunch of deliveries to the stores, to the industrial businesses, what have you. So yeah, the day after that, according to I don't know. This is on the Yeah, the tank was still on fire, and Enterprise was still closed. And it was thought best to let them empty on their own, but an unmanned fire engine went in and sprayed. So that was that. And as of the 27th, they confirmed that it was WTOL 11 confirmed that it was still burning. So as far as we know, it's still burning today. Nobody's seen the morning news yet, but maybe some of you are watching it now. Call in and tell me what's going on if you want to. But yeah, so I was a little curious, naturally, about hydrogen and, what it does. So I looked it up. It's a chemical element, of course, with a symbol H in the atomic number 1. It is the lightest element. And an element being, of course, a chemical substance that cannot be broken down into other substances by chemical reactions. For a quick review that I sort of needed, it's diatomic, meaning there's one molecule is composed only of 2 atoms. Diatomic. There are
H2.
some, yes, H2, yep. There are some environmental problems associated with it. Hydrogen contributes to climate change via leakage because the molecules are tiny and escape very easily. So it's hard to contain, in fact. It warms the planet by increasing levels of methane and ozone. I'm not exactly sure how all that works, but yeah, that's what happens. And if it's produced using fossil fuels, as it often is, it also leads to emissions during production. Burning hydrogen can create nitrogen oxide, which is creates smog and respiratory illnesses. And yeah, according to homestudy.com, a lot of it in the air is bad. At low levels, it can even be therapeutic. It helps with breathing, lung inflammation, I guess. But if you have a lot of it, the main problem with that is that it leads to there being less oxygen, percentage-wise. And without oxygen, we get breathing problems, headaches, drowsiness, vomiting, and depression. There's also the whole green hydrogen issue. The first thing I saw when I Googled hydrogen was a thing by ExxonMobil that wanted me to know a lot of stuff about hydrogen from its point of view. And one of it, mostly it added up to, well, it can be made less environmentally harmful and less, that's why it's good. It can be produced less harmfully. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. So there's the green hydrogen, which is hydrogen which is produced using wind and solar, but yeah, it's still hydrogen. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I guess also it can explode
Oh,
if
yeah.
you've got very large quantities of it.
It can. Yeah.
That's not good. So yeah, really hoping we get that under control quickly.
Yeah.
Quicker, soon, someday. Yeah.
I do a little hydrogen explosion every year in my house for Earth Day, so celebration. And the way it causes methane and ozone is that the H2 molecules interact with the nitrogen, the N2 and the O2 in the atmosphere, and chemically react. So it's you don't want tons of hydrogen leaking out into your atmosphere. It's not good. But yeah, so all right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
I always liked hydrogen because it's the most abundant in the universe. It's 3/4 of everything that there is hydrogen. So
if you live around there and you start feeling short of breath, of nauseous, don't wait for a
Right.
notification. Probably just
run
get
away.
further away. Yes.
Run away. And it you reminded me. I just on Friday was talking with this fella who's earning an environmental science degree from Idaho, and he was in this class on energy that was being taught by a retired nuclear engineer who basically laid out this energy supply scenario for the grid that had nukes producing hydrogen and ignored almost everything else except a little bit of wind. So hydrogen is being kind of marketed by a lot of the really polluting industries like nukes and carbon. But what's happening now around the world is that we're kind of skipping the hydrogen storage solution and just putting all that energy that gets generated by wind and solar directly into batteries, which is a much more efficient way to both store the energy and to move it around. So the hydrogen economy, George W. Bush talked about that, but it looks like it might not be necessary. We may be able to just skip over that whole thing and go right to electric for everything. All right, well, thank you so much, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
And now on to ecological news. And not too late to give us a call, 877-909-1007. So our first story comes from desmog.com, DESMOG, story on September 19th. New anti-greenwashing rules are, quote, silencing, unquote, industry, oil advocates say. This was a really refreshing story because the fossil fuel industry people are whining and crying that they're being prevented from like saturating the airwaves with misleading ads because Canada, somebody from the one of the Canadian, the New Democratic Party in Canada slipped something into their omnibus spending bill called they modified the Canada Competition Act. Okay, and this modification called C-59, and basically it says by law now in Canada, environmental claims must be backed by actual data.
Okay.
So if you say, we're doing carbon captured storage and it's preventing carbon from getting into the atmosphere, you have to actually be able to prove that. And the problem, of course, is that we know that it actually doesn't work, that carbon capture and storage puts as much or more carbon into the air than if you weren't trying to, catch the carbon and pump it into the ground. And the penalties on this are actually quite strong. It's 3% of your global revenues as a company. So for oil companies, we're talking, billions of dollars they're going to get fined if they make these false claims that they're allowed to make in the U.S. By the way, we've decided that freedom of speech means freedom to lie, and so we see these kind of greenwashing advertising all the time. But in Canada, it's actually against the law. And,
Canada,
right? And one example was that. They were claiming, Canada's oil companies have been claiming for a while that, we've increased our production of oil, but our emissions haven't increased. And it turns out that the only way they get that is by ignoring the increased emissions from tar sand production. Even though tar sand production is now the biggest way oil is produced, they only use the data from their old, traditional wells that just pumped oil out of the ground. So they were lying. So they had to stop making that lie because now it's against the law in Canada. So it's just really, really refreshing to see a country actually doing what's necessary to counteract.
I'm not sure. I think
disinformation.
those guys need actual shock collars. It's turned into a habit for them. It's going to be hard to break.
That if they had managed to slip that into the omnibus bill, shock collars for oil executives, maybe we'd see some real change.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Exactly. Although it's not very libertarian.
No, it's kind of anti-libertarian. Oh, well. Yeah. All right. So next story, we're off to electrek.co. And this story ran on September 19th. The title was, Your Electric Car Will Fall Apart Before Its Battery Pack Does, Study Finds.
Well, something's got to go first. That's just how life is with technology.
Yeah, even electric cars don't last forever. But now that we've got more EVs on the road, this think tank called Geotab has been studying how quickly the batteries degrade under, not the theoretical degradation, not the predictions, but actually using the data from real EVs. Okay. And it turns out that on average, there is variation according to your model and so forth. On average, the batteries in an electric car degrade about 1.8% per year, so less than 2%. And what that means is that the average lifespan for a car or for a vehicle in the U.S. is about 15 years. And so at that point, the battery pack in an electric vehicle is still at 3/4 power.
Wow.
So there's been some degradation, but, still plenty of juice in there to go a long ways. And after 20 years, which is kind of like the most you could expect a car to last if you take really good care of it, the batteries are still going to be at 2/3 capacity.
Cool.
So, yeah. So this whole idea, one of the disinformation scare things on the internet to try to discourage people from looking at electric cars is, oh, you're going to have to replace the battery pack, and it's like $50,000. No, you are not going to have to replace the battery pack. It's going to last longer than your suspension or your engine block or whatever, whatever mechanical thing fails somewhere in that 15 to 20 year range. And then, what you can do after that actually is take that battery pack and turn it into a backup battery for your house. So, because it's even 2/3 the capacity of a automobile battery pack is enough to run a house for like 3 weeks in terms of emergency backup power. So, don't listen to the disinformation. Generally, the more caps there are in a post, the more, scary the post is, the more it's probably like disinformation. So, and one of the reasons that this is true is that now electric cars have something called active battery management in terms of temperature. So active battery temperature management, which is that the car keeps track of how hot it is and things. And when it gets too hot, the car will turn the car's fan on by itself and cool the batteries down. And so this actually extends the life of the battery quite a bit. So some good news from electrek.co. Now, unfortunately, we had some bad news here in Ohio this past week. We had a styrene leak. Speaking of leaking things, a train car had a failure of the chemical that's supposed to prevent the styrene in the tank car from like reacting and expanding with heat and stuff. That for some reason that failed. So on AP story, September 26th, title, Evacuation Order Lifted for Ohio Town Where Dangerous Chemical Leak Occurred. So the evacuations happened on the 24th. This was in Whitewater Township, which is just west of Cincinnati. And so people had to be out of their houses for 2 days. The evacuation was for about a half-mile circle. This was right next to the Great Miami River, which is a great river. I do like it. Exposure to high styrene can cause headaches, nausea, lung damage, and long-term exposure causes organ damage. It's toxic and it's flammable. And it's just another example of the fact that we're using the wrong chemicals. A lot of times, for a lot of our technologies, there are non-toxic alternatives that are just environmentally more beneficial, but a lot of times they're a little bit more expensive, and so industry sticks with the nasty stuff.
And also, if you're looking for a substitute, I would suggest polystyrene, the punk singer. Much cooler.
Yeah, you could
much cooler and not toxic.
Put that singer to work.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, looks like that one's under control now, but it's just a reminder this could happen anywhere there's chemical train cars. Okay, on to some good news. We're gonna do the whipsaw effect here. The United Kingdom is about to, as in tomorrow, Monday the 29th, they're about to close the very last coal-powered power station in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
Yeah, and the UK pretty much started the Industrial Revolution with coal. They've been burning it for 143 years in the United Kingdom. Coal usage actually peaked way back in 1913. I didn't know that. When the UK was burning 292 million metric tons of coal every year. It had been going down steadily. In 2019, they were down to 2 million tons. And now in 2024, they're down to 0 as of tomorrow. They're going to stop. Just before closing, this coal was only providing 2% of UK's energy needs. And wind and solar have made, especially wind in the UK, they've gone really big into offshore wind. And that is what has taken the place of coal. It's cheaper. Going back to our libertarian guests, in the competition, even coal loses out to wind. Also, there's some degree of solar, and the German company that owns the last coal plant in the UK, Uniper, they're going to use the site of the coal plant. They're going to create a battery factory. So, really good. And in the U.S., in 2024, coal is only representing a few percent of the increase in new generation, because we're still using more power. We're still having increased electricity generation, but coal is only a tiny bit of that, and nukes are only 2% of the increase in generation here. So we have not turned the corner yet. We're still building new fossil fuel plants, but we have slowed down, and we're preparing to turn the corner. Will we make it in time to save the planet? At this point, it doesn't look good, but at least there is movement, so there's still some hope. Okay, next story. We're off to Athens, Ohio, and we reported about how Athens had put in place a plastic bag ban, and the Court of Common Pleas threw it out. The judge there, George McCarthy, ruled against Athens and said your plastic bag ban opposes state laws which have banned plastic bag bans. He
just pass a local law to ban the statewide bans. Then. Yeah.
Well, and he issued a summary judgment on it. And the thing about it is that the state law bans plastic bag bans, but home rule says that local communities can produce laws that protect the local health. And so the state ban on plastic bags should not overturn the constitutional right of local communities to protect the health of their citizens. And the thing about it is, the reason they're able to do this appeal is that the judge offered a summary judgment, which legally speaking, that means everybody on both sides of the issue, before the thing starts getting adjudicated, agrees on the basic facts of the case.
Okay.
So like everybody agreed, okay, plastic bags are harmful. Everybody agreed, to a whole bunch of facts. But the thing is that the judge, when he made his decision, he did his own research.
Oh.
He brought in a whole bunch of new stuff that nobody had talked about in the actual case. He went on social media and quoted social media posts and said, look, people don't want to get rid of the plastic bags, Yeah.
Okay.
And so
people didn't want to get indoor plumbing neither.
Yeah, that's true. I remember that.
We had to make them.
Yeah, and car, electricity. A lot of people didn't want electricity, and yeah. So what that did was, judges are supposed to decide cases based on the facts presented before them.
Yeah.
And instead, this guy went out and tried to find evidence to support what he wanted, which is to prevent the ban from going into place. So they filed their petitions, or they filed their on the 23rd. They filed an appeal, and so we're going to have to just keep an eye on that. So Athens, Ohio, may yet be able to have a plastic bag ban.
All right.
Okay, last story, and this one is kind of disappointing. Tesla is erasing its own history, is the title of the story from InsideEVs.com. This actually ran on August 27th, but way back at the beginning, in 2003, Elon Musk wrote this beautiful, detailed manifesto, basically saying he's going to stop climate change by creating electric cars, by creating an electric car industry. And he said he was doing it to prevent global warming. And the actual quote from Elon Musk from 2003, the overarching purpose of Tesla Motors and the reason I am funding this company is to help expedite the move from a mine and burn hydrocarbon economy towards a solar electric economy. And that was great. And a lot of people loved that and loved him. But now he's gone completely crazy to the point of he had an interview with Donald Trump on his on X, and he basically declared his love for the oil and gas industry now. And and so he is trying to rewrite the history of Tesla. They've taken down everything that was on their corporate website from previous to 2019. So 2019, we can mark that as the year that Elon Musk, became evil. And so now his interview with Trump was just fully completing his turn to the dark side. So, I
think Elon has figured out that progressive political people will call you on your crap.
Yeah,
is what it is, and
right.
now
and
you don't
how
like
dare
us
they?
anymore.
And how dare they?
Right.
But it was basically those progressive political people. It was the people who cared about global warming, who read his manifesto and believed him. They were the customers that created his company because they made the sacrifice necessary to buy a super expensive electric car because they believed that this was a way that we could, help prevent global warming and bring us into a greener future. And so he has just completely turned his back on his base. He's gone, and now he's embracing the oil and gas industry, for gosh sake. So apparently it was all about the money. He was making this
Who'd have
claim
thunk it?
back in 2003 just so he could become a, multi-billionaire. So anyway, very disappointing news from Elon Musk, but in keeping with what we've been seeing in the last since 2019. So, all right. So don't you be an Elon Musk. You guys help us fight global warming. Do everything you can. If we all do everything we can still beat this terrible catastrophe that's coming down. That's it. That's it for this show. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!